the Strippo grade Model 3 is just not going to appeal to anybody with like a better choice than that, so I'm not buying it this time. Literally not buying it, Hello and welcome back to the Plugged In Podcast, a weekly news show all about the future of transportation. I'm Patrick George, editor-in-chief of InsideEVs.
And I'm Tim Levin, senior editor at InsideEVs. On this week's show, the standard Tesla Model Y and Model 3 are here, but they aren't really the affordable EVs that a lot of people wanted. Plus, we're joined by Albert Gore, the executive director of the Zero Emission Transportation Association, to talk about what's next for EVs in America. But first, Patrick, how are you doing today? It's been a long week with all this Tesla news and other stuff. It's been a long one. How are you holding up?
It's been relentless, including at work. Like Mac Hogan, who's my top lieutenant, besides you, obviously, is absconded to Italy to go drive Ferraris, both of the electric and gas kind. I don't blame him. Like somebody tosses you a key to a gas Ferrari, like, you say yes. And we've had a lot going on at InsideEVs at the company this week, and we're not even going to get to on this podcast the fact that like a new Chevy Bolt is dropping like tonight/tomorrow. So sorry, fam, we'll be covering that next week. But it's been pretty relentless this week. We're hanging in there. How about you, man? Are you staying safe and sane? You doing okay?
I'm good. I'm rising and grinding, crushing it, kicking ass.
Thriving right now.
Trying to.
Before we get to this week's episode, I wanted to remind you that you should keep an eye out for the special bonus podcast episodes we've been doing from our partnership with BMW at Climate Week New York City. This week, we dove into BMW's big plans for its hydrogen future. And on next Wednesday, you get to hear how BMW is also trying to reduce carbon emissions across the entire board. We actually had a really interesting discussion about that. So hope you guys tune in.
Yeah, and next Friday, I think we should tease this too. We'll have our episode with GM President Mark Royce, where we talk all about GM, how they're doing with EVs, how they're doing autonomy, what he thinks about China. We'll talk about the new Bolt that's coming out this week. That should be a really fun discussion.
I think he's probably going to tell us about the new Bolt because like the briefing is literally happening when we're talking to Mark Royce, like tomorrow as we record this. So it's like, hey, General Motors president, please tell us about this one car, which is hopefully a good use of his time.
Yeah, exactly. We may not have it on the show this week, but we will have the best briefing, right? Straight from the GM president next week.
Yeah, we know it's coming. We're on top of it.
Totally.
We've got this. Yeah. Okay. Cool. Let's dig into some Tesla news, which is it was a not inconsequential reason for why this week was so busy. Leave it to Tesla to dominate the news cycle with a new car debut, as they do kind of uniquely, I think. Tim, do you remember where you were when the Cybertruck was first debuted?
I don't. Well, I was a mere civilian at that point. I was not covering cars, so I was probably just like in my room in Queens watching it. But and leave it to Tesla to dominate the news cycle also, not just with a new car, but like actually not really a new cars, like with like kind of crappier, cheaper versions of their existing cars. And then we and everybody else just like runs to cover it from every angle, despite them actually having no PR department. I feel like we got kind of played on that one, the whole news industry.
What, this week with what we're going to talk about, the Model 3 and Model Y standard? Yeah. Yes, we'll get into that in a second. These like very stripped down, ostensibly more affordable Teslas. But like, yeah, when that news dropped, like I went into like breaking news mode, and you did too. And we just grabbed every angle of the story and did like breakout videos, and as we are trained to do as reporters. But when it was over, Tim, I found myself feeling empty. Almost alone in the universe. Like, why did I spend so much time and energy writing about the Tesla with cloth seats? Would I have done this for any other manufacturer? Have all my life decisions been wrong? And I didn't get any sleep that night because I was spiraling so hard. But as that happens sometimes.
It doesn't show at all.
Yeah, thanks. Appreciate that, man. I moisturize. That helps. But, this latest Tesla debut, not likely to be as memorable as some of the other ones. We're talking about the Model 3 standard and Model Y standard. These are not the $25,000 Tesla models that the company's been alluding to for years, that everyone's been kind of hoping for.
Yeah.
A lot more expensive than that. They are about $37,000 for the Model 3 standard and just under $40,000 for the Model Y standard.
Yeah, and add about $1,600 on top of those for destination and order fees. You're looking at a little over $41,000 for the Model Y. And yeah, the reactions to this have been pretty muted. I think that's probably actually a kind way of saying it. We've seen a lot worse reactions to that online, and we'll get into that in a sec. But let's start with what these cars are. What did Tesla put in them? What did Tesla take out of them to get these prices? And what's good here? I mean, the good thing, the positive thing, I guess, for the market is Tesla did bring these cars down to a lower price point. You know, there's a lower entry price for the Model Y and the Model 3 than there would have been without these cars. We've got our two stripped back versions of the Model 3 and Model Y. Bunch of different cost-cutting measures. The Y actually looks different from the outside. It loses the light bars in the front and the rear. It gets these smaller, I think, kind of dinkier looking wheels also. And then there's a bunch of stuff that I think you'd kind of expect from what we for months now have been expecting would be kind of rental car grade versions of these really popular cars, right?
I don't think it looks great, the Model Y, especially.
The proportions of it are not amazing. And I think it's a lot of it has to do with those smaller 18-inch wheels.
Yeah.
It just it doesn't look quite right.
And I like the new one. This is controversial. I like the looks of the new, Juniper Model Y that with a thin light bar, and this is just kind of odd. This guy. So
it's a little bit of like a mashup between the new Model 3 and the new Model Y. They give it these like slim headlights instead of the full bar.
But that's not all.
Yeah, that's not all. So they have less range than the previous base trims at 321 miles.
Still really not bad.
Quite good for a base trim. They're slower to 60 miles an hour. They don't supercharge quite as fast, which makes sense since the batteries are a little bit smaller. Their interiors are more stripped back, so you don't get that swanky wraparound ambient lighting throughout the cabin. You get more fabric instead of, the nice leatherette materials. No touchscreen for the backseat passengers, no front seat ventilation, kind of all types of things that you'd expect. Yeah, they're probably going to pull this stuff out if they're cutting costs.
Yeah, well, and a lot of this kind of surprised me too, like especially the slower charging speeds. Like that was an interesting choice. And then there were some omissions that were like downright puzzling. Like the standard models don't get a radio, FM or AM. So, I don't know. I remember the last time I listened to FM radio, to be honest, but like a lot of people still do listen to the traditional radio bands, so not here. They also lose auto steer, which is that lane keeping system that's like one half of Autopilot, which is really wild given that like automated driving assistance is so central to the Tesla thesis. Like I'm really kind of shocked at that one. So it's all,
I have a feeling that they're going to walk that back. Like, everybody, so many people, our friends at Out of Spec, like these kind of influential Tesla people were like, what the hell are you doing taking away? Like this basically takes away Autopilot from the cars, right?
Right.
This is a feature that's been in Teslas for years as standard. You do not have to pay anything extra for it. And you get the, adaptive cruise control and lane centering. So you turn it on the highway and you can just the car will automatically go for you while you pay attention. And now it only has the adaptive cruise, not the lane centering. So it's kind of a really weird thing to remove something that, is so central to Tesla's like identity.
So it's another hands-on like glorified cruise control instead.
Yeah. And
those all suck. Yeah.
Yeah. And Kyle Connor pointed this out, that you get lane centering and adaptive cruise control as standard on a base Toyota Corolla, which costs like $22,000. And Tesla's supposed to be like the high-tech car company that's getting everybody into self-driving cars, and they cut lane centering from their car, which pretty weird move.
Very quickly to point out one thing that's been on my mind lately too is the fact that like without tax credits and incentives, it's like it is a very real possibility that people will buy gas cars instead of EVs or go from EVs back to gas cars, and stuff like what you just talked about isn't helping the case. You know what I mean? Like it's like honestly, any reasonable person who's like I could get that same deal on a more nicely equipped Toyota Corolla for what 10 or 15 grand less, like I'm not sure I blame them for making that call. You know?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
And there were other weird omissions. The Model Y still has a glass roof like they all do, but they covered it up with a cloth headliner on the inside. They call this a closed glass roof, which is like hilarious terminology.
That's like permanent. It can't be removed, right?
Not officially. Like I have a feeling that a lot of people are just going to take
an X-Acto knife,
and cut that shit out because you get a free glass roof, I guess.
That's an
instance where it seems like they kind of actually they spent money to make the car worse so that it would cost less, or to try to direct people to the premium models. Another one is the Model Y's frunk is now smaller, and it also lacks like all the nice plastic cladding that used to be around it is gone. Instead, you see all this kind of janky interior metal bits. I guess the bottom line is like they cut about $5,000 off the price of these cars. In some ways, it makes perfect sense. Like, not as great an interior, some other things like that. In other ways, they may have gone too far.
Yeah, I don't think this one's going to keep BYD executives awake at night. I think my biggest issue here too is that like the price gulf between like these base models and like a more normal, nicely equipped Tesla is kind of negligible. I mean, like, do you think these are good deals, either of these cars?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think I need to preface it by saying there have been a lot of YouTubers and some outlets that got to drive these cars. Tesla had a rare media event for this, it seems, that they
didn't invite us.
We were not graced with an invite. So this is all like looking from the outside. The Model Y I do not think is a good deal. This Model Y standard, it's $5,000 less, but you don't get Autopilot. You get a car that obviously looks like the budget version. Like from the outside, everybody sees that you got the cheaper one. And I think almost everybody who is considering this is just going to upgrade to what's now called the premium version for an extra $5,000. According to Tesla's like financing on its website, it's only $72-ish a month to upgrade to the premium. So it's like if you're already paying close to $800 a month for a car, why not get the one that has all the stuff you want in it, that has the nicer seats and the ambient lighting and the bigger frunk and all the cool stuff.
And if you're switching from gas to EV, like that's your monthly gas budget on some cars, depending on what you drive, is $70. I feel like that's fair. Like that's roughly what I pay for the Mazda 3, kind of, for gas. I'm like, okay, that's a negligible difference.
I mean, it's justifiable. I think for a lot of people who are buying a car that's already close to $40,000, like, it may be a justifiable expense. I think the Model 3 is actually a much better deal. This is the one that costs $36,990 now. It does not look different than the premium model. So from the outside, same old Model 3. It doesn't have the dinky looking wheels. It just overall looks, I think, better than the new Model Y standard does. And the cuts, it loses Autopilot, but the cuts don't seem to go quite as deep on that Model 3.
Here's the crushing thing too, is that like every automaker will say we don't plan our cars around regulations or policy or things like tax credits, but like in private, they do. And it's like I feel like these things were planned for tax credits. I really do, because they'll never say it, nobody would admit it, even an automaker that talks to us would not admit this, but like, come on, that Model 3 was supposed to be a $29,000 car. The Model Y was supposed to be what, 30, 33, 32,000. This makes a hell of a lot more sense when you think of it that way. And that's not the case anymore. And so
you mean that they started planning these with the assumption that the tax credits might still be in place? Like when they started planning these, let's say over a year ago, and then like if you have the tax credit, your $40,000 Model Y standard is now $32,500, and that's pretty darn good. And your $37,000 Model 3 is now a little under 30 grand. Like, that's amazing.
I don't know if that's the case. I want to be very clear here.
Yeah,
like, I'm not privy to the decisions within the company, but like, if I had to put money on it, like, I think that's probably what happened, because there are other OEMs facing similar decisions right now as to how to price their vehicles in a post-tax credit environment and how much cost do they eat if they can't. Like, that's going around. I bet anything that's what happened here. And again, this company, I would love to call some people and ask them that, but they're not big on transparency. So
yeah. So I guess, I mean, the bigger question is, like, is this what Tesla needs? Right? We've seen Tesla sales have been dropping. They had a really great quarter, Q3, because everybody did, because the tax credit was going away. They sold almost 500,000 cars globally that quarter, but over the last over a year, almost 2 years, the trend has not been great. So is this what Tesla needs to recover its sales and to, hopefully start growing again?
I have a hard time believing that at these prices. Again, if you had the tax credit and these were like high 20s, low 30s, then like maybe, yeah. But like, it's just not a very compelling buy when you consider there are really good options under 40 grand now. Like, kind of suddenly, like the new Nissan Leaf, 300 miles of range and 30 grand. There's that Bolt that's coming out today, tomorrow, whatever day it is. I don't even remember. Yesterday. If you're listening to this, it came out yesterday. The Equinox EV is still good. Like, they slashed the prices on the Hyundai Ioniq 5 for 2026. And you can find all these details on InsideEVs.com. But like, there are some great deals to be had. And like, the rental grade Teslas just kind of don't cut it. And I'd add to that too. Kevin Williams, one of our reporters, he had a story today. He was like, look, this is even going to do worse in Europe, honestly, because like, they now have a lot of really good lower cost electric options from like Renault and Volkswagen, not to mention the Chinese. And it's like the Strippo grade Model 3 is just not going to appeal to anybody with like a better choice than that, so I'm not buying it this time. Literally not buying it,
Yeah, I think at best these can probably help Tesla maintain. I mean, when you look at it, it's kind of a disappointing announcement. It was almost a non-announcement, right? It's just new trims that were a little bit cheaper, same old car. And they basically, I think you have to look at it. Sorry. I think you mentioned the tax credit. I think it's important to linger on that for a second. Tesla has been struggling to sell cars for the last over a year, and that was with the tax credit, and that was with the introduction of genuinely new Model 3 and Model Y, and a genuinely new Cybertruck. They were still struggling to grow their sales. Sales are declining. Now, these new cars, now the tax credit's gone, they introduced the base model cars that cost even more now than a Tesla would have cost you when the tax credit was in place. So these cars cost more, they offer less, and it's really unclear that these will actually, expose Tesla to a bigger buyer base than Tesla already had, right? They cost about the same as what you could pay before. So
yeah, before you jump in and be like, Patrick and Tim, you guys are no fun. You're a bunch of haters and losers. We're not the only ones who are disappointed.
We've heard that one before.
I've heard that before, first of all. I hear that all the time. Second, we're not the only ones who said that about this Tesla. Because reactions across the board have not been great. Tesla's stock price was down almost 5% Tuesday, the day that these were revealed. Tesla fans all over the world who really never say anything bad about the company, they've been taken to X and other social media platforms to complain about it. A bunch of news outlets like Yahoo Finance called it a case of shrinkflation, which I love, which is like,
I think that's great.
It's when you get a product that's like the same or worse product, usually worse, but it costs as much or more. So that's a nice burn there. Our pals at Heat Map News, like their newsletter today was like, these cars suck. There was like that was like the headlining story in like the top climate tech website in America. So it's really not done great. At some point, this company's just going to need to shut up and like make some more actual new cars.
Yeah.
And they're poised to be the one that can like deliver the Toyota Corolla of EVs. Like I think they actually could figure that if they wanted to, as an engineering force, as a company that's gotten battery costs down. Like they could pull this off if they wanted to, but like phoning it in This is really like the doing your homework on the bus of electric vehicles, man, and it shows.
Yeah, and you can see why, like, Tesla started talking about this sometime, I think, over a year ago, right? They were like, we're working on new, more affordable models based on our current platforms, right? And they were very reluctant.
Could mean a lot of things.
They were very reluctant to talk about that over and over again. They got asked by Wall Street analysts. They didn't really like hype it up like they would hype up a Cybertruck or something. They seemed like they really did not want to talk about it. And now you can see why. And it's because they are not new models and they're not actually that affordable. They are the same old cars that cost a little bit less.
I don't know. I hope to get behind the wheel soon. I really like the current Model 3. I really, really like the new Model Y. I'm eager to see if these things can overcome these flaws, but I don't feel like they're priced competitively enough to do that. So
yeah,
we'll see.
Yeah, I think the last thing is just that, like, a lot of the counter argument is, well, Tesla's a robotaxi company. Tesla's a humanoid robot company, and so they don't need cars. And this really seems like, obviously that's what they've been saying for a long time. This seems like the nail in the coffin for the idea that Tesla would ever do anything more with cars. It really seems like you said, phoning it in, but also like they are planning for the future to be the robots. And so let's just spend as little money as we possibly can to maintain our sales and hope to God that the robotaxi works in the next couple of years. Personally, I mean, we've seen this self-driving technology. It's not up to snuff yet. And so the idea that Tesla's going to be rolling out cyber cabs with no steering wheel in 1 year, and that's going to be Tesla's business and they won't need to sell any new cars ever again, is kind of crazy talk. Like, they will need to your point. They cannot sell the same old silhouette. Like, I don't know, it boggles my mind that this is what they decided to do, because you look side by side, a regular person out there is going to be like, that's a Model Y, that's a Model Y, that's a Model Y. It's all the same freaking car,
Yeah, and I'm a champion MMA fighter who just does blogs and podcasts on the side.
Yes, exactly.
We're focused on the future here.
Heavyweight champion 2027.
Yeah. All the best fighters start when they're 40. It's great. All right. Well, now we're going to shift gears a little bit and talk with somebody who knows the EV and climate space inside and out really well. And he's going to come on and talk about what's next for the electrification shift in America without EV tax credits and other policy changes. This is our interview with Albert Gore, the executive director of the Zero Emission Transportation Association. Well, joining us today to talk about the future of the electric vehicle market in America at an uneven and challenging time is Albert Gore III, executive director of the Zero Emission Transportation Association. Albert, welcome to the show, sir.
Thanks so much for having me, Patrick and Tim.
Yeah, we really appreciate it. I guess just first, we want to dive into the policy changes that have been happening, all sorts of different stuff in the EV market. But before that, just give us the background of Zeta. When was this organization founded? What do you guys do?
Yeah, Zeta came into existence about 5 years ago, just after the election in 2020. And we're a coalition of companies across 5 sectors that together are seeking to, inform the policy process with regard to EVs. And what unifies the companies that have joined Zeta from the mining sector, battery manufacturing and recycling, EV manufacturing, charging equipment, manufacturing, deployment, and utility sectors is EVs are the future. Let's facilitate the adoption of electric vehicles, because in this country, there is a lot of hesitation. There's a lot of 2 steps forward, 1 step back, hopefully just 1 step back. But because it's a new industry and the all electric OEMs, have all come into being just in the last, decade or two, you need a kind of you need support. You need a group effort and all of that aggregated, jobs impact, investment impact, influence to try to counteract some of the anti-EV forces that, inevitably are, every couple of years looking for opportunities to weaken policies that encourage EVs. So, we benefit a lot from the breadth of our membership. It also means that we work on a lot of different policies all the way up the supply chain and all the way down to charging and electricity supply. But we get to, give informed answers to any question somebody might have, whether they're a policymaker or a member of the public, about electric vehicles and anything that goes into them, how you charge them, etc. And those questions are very, very relevant right now. But I started at Zeta in 2023, January. So coming up on 3 years. It's, there'll never be another period like this, I think, for just the pace of innovation and the pace of policy changes, both positive and negative.
Yeah.
And it's been a lot of fun.
So how the hell did this get so partisan? I mean, like, I think this has become one of the biggest roadblocks. And like, I've written this before. It's like, in retrospect, when you had like Democratic politicians sort of campaigning against EVs, last year, like last November, like, Elissa Slotnick in Michigan, like, I don't have a charger in my backyard. Like that was kind of a warning sign. Like, it was almost like this had really turned off a big segment of America when maybe it didn't need to. So how did that polarization start? And by the way, very quickly, I know Zeta is a nonpartisan organization. You've got members across the aisle, so I'm trying to be fair in that assessment. Then,
well, it was a bipartisan phenomenon. So there were certainly plenty of folks on both sides of the aisle who were skeptical about EVs. I think, first of all, I just want to say of now Senator Slotkin, I think she spoke about the issue as well and as intelligently as anybody could, and I was amazed by that.
Yeah, the concerns that normal folks have, she's not wrong.
She understood the issue so well. It had become I think through repetition, more than anything, and sort of oversimplification, the characterization of, several different things, 3 or 4 different things as an EV mandate. Mandates in general are unpopular. I think culturally, it's like, don't tell me what to do.
Yeah.
But when you layer on these things of like, well, there's a lot you don't understand about these don't work in the cold weather, and there's not enough charging, and China, all these are made in China. I mean, there were people that were hearing all of these are made in China, which was, news to those of us who'd been at these, gigafactories churning out, over 1 million a year in the United States. But nonetheless, it created an information ecosystem that was challenging. I mean, any kind of change is challenging. It takes the focus off of what could be improved from the status quo, and it puts the focus on what do we not know about this thing, what could go wrong. And with the benefit of knowing a lot about EVs and charging availability, you can say, well, yeah, here's why a number of these things are really not a concern to the degree that, I think you feel they are. But there was not the same communications channel available to counteract that to the same audience and with the same degree of efficiency. And, there was a really positive, legislative record with regard to, American manufacturing and electric vehicles, and a regulatory framework that, I think was thoughtful and really took into account, the legacy industry concerns. But it was hard to, in the context of the election, I think, to give the vocal defense that was needed. And I don't blame anybody for that. I understand that. It was there were so many things to respond to.
You're talking about a lot of nebulous things like jobs and like long-term battery investments and competing with China. It's hard to visualize that versus like you're going to be forced out of your gas car someday, which is a bit more less abstract,
Yeah. I mean, people sometimes got tired of hearing the aggregate job numbers. Because it was nebulous, but I mean, that was real. That was not just a number picked out of thin air. That was the sum of, dozens of projects some of which were underway, some of which were breaking ground soon. So, but I think when you aggregate it, put it at a high level, which is an efficient way to communicate it, it also takes some of the realness out of it. And, that was something that we've spent a lot of time on over the last year, is trying to make it very real at the local level, state, regional level. These are real buildings, real construction jobs, real manufacturing jobs.
And so one of the things might be this, the messaging, some of the misconceptions around EVs, but like broadly, what do you see as the biggest challenges facing growth in the EV market in America? And maybe a part two to that question, maybe a more specific way to phrase it is like, what policy shifts have been most detrimental to this vision of, rapidly growing EV sales? And I know policy isn't the only thing. We also have, there's consumer issues and that kind of stuff, but I'm curious to get your sense of what's holding EVs back.
Yeah. I think more than any one policy change, it's policy uncertainty. It's rapid, unpredictable changes to the regulatory landscape, to the tax, the tax system with regard to tax incentives, both consumer and the business production incentives, and that was something that really, it came into effect this summer when the OBBA was passed.
One Big Beautiful Bill Act, the one that got rid of tax credits for EVs and such. Yeah.
Yes. The reconciliation bill is an easier way to say it.
Yes.
But, you go back 6 or 9 months. I mean, in the fall of 2024, the House majority set up, ad hoc committees, tax committees, to receive comment on that would inform their writing of the tax bill. This was before the election. And that was a very thorough, robust process that had a lot of participation. But, the industry was looking at that process as, okay, this is something that could very likely happen. So, what that impacts business decisions. Post-election, I think then it was, okay, a very real process of saying, what about this framework is aligned with your goals as Congress and the administration's goals? Bringing investment into the United States, growing jobs in the United States, making things here. But all of that creates an uncertainty that, if you're looking at an investment in a spreadsheet, you have to assign, a value to the risk, which, essentially impacts your NPV, your expected value of your investment return. And the risk was very high and remains very high. I mean, we're in the middle of the rulemaking now.
If I may, you mean like the investments that car companies, battery companies are making, like the risk of like that being tanked basically by policy uncertainty, like that goes into the margin, is what you're saying?
Yeah, I think that's like, after the IRA passed, there was a policy and regulatory framework in place. There was the regulatory framework was taking shape, the following year. The 2023 began the rulemaking for the post, 2027 and beyond EPA GHG rules. But there was at least a sense of like, here's the playing field. Okay, the United States has de-risked a lot of investment in manufacturing in these sectors: minerals, batteries, EVs, other technologies as well. So investment poured into the United States.
Mm-hmm.
I think as the possibility that all of that was going to be revisited very shortly increased, then that brings the risk back up, and that affects the amount of investment that comes in, the scale of it, etc.
Mm-hmm.
That's just on the manufacturing side. I mean, you know, consumer sentiment, demand is a whole other thing. But I think you have some people who think, I personally think EV demand historically for sure has always been much higher than policymakers and automakers assume it will be. There are a lot of buyers out there for EVs, not necessarily because they want to reduce their carbon footprint, but because it has a lot of utility.
Yeah.
It's cheaper to own and drive. So I think that's been a major challenge, because when you have, the final step in the manufacturing process is vehicle assembly. Every link in the supply chain for that factory then, is adjusting to that. There are some ways where if you have overcapacity, you can do, energy storage. You can there
overcapacity of batteries, like
overcapacity for batteries. You can,
right.
And same with, minerals, like when you get that high, there are uses for these things, but
yeah,
it creates a level of uncertainty where everybody's in the retooling process, which takes money and time, and adjusting to that is challenging. You need to adjust to your customers' demand.
Yeah, so America's in like the whiplash era, right? It's I find this fascinating because I have to wonder, okay, this is such an abrupt reversal that we're seeing for these car companies, for battery companies. All of them, had fuel economy rules to meet, EV tax credits that helped them along. Now it's all gone. Okay, great. What happens in 2 years or whatever when possibly the other party retakes Congress, or there's a Democrat in the White House? Is like, do you expect it to go back the way it was, or is this just what we're doomed to in America now, where it's just this crazy whiplash every few years, and reversals in policy that are pretty dramatic?
Well, there's good news and bad news, I think. The good news is I don't think that whatever effects like that you described will be unique to the electric vehicle industry. The bad news is I think that there will be long run effects on the way the United States is viewed as an investment environment.
No, that's true. Yeah.
Across the board. That's not set in stone. I think, that's dynamic. There does seem to be some on the fly adjustment, some understanding that, for instance, if you want to encourage manufacturing in the United States, it doesn't make sense. It doesn't make great sense to put high tariffs on manufacturing inputs, because that will limit the capacity of manufacturing that grows in the United States, and thus the number of jobs in manufacturing in the United States. So I think, but that is what we've done. We've got a situation now where it in theory, may be cheaper to manufacture a car in Japan and ship the whole thing here than to ship parts and components here and manufacture the car here. I think, hopefully with an understanding of that as a result of the current policy, that will change, things will evolve. So again, we're in the very early stages of this, new policy and regulatory framework that's coming into place. But trade is a huge, huge part of it.
Mm-hmm.
Tim, to your first question, which is, what's the biggest barrier or the biggest challenge for EV adoption? I think, again, not unique to EVs, but has been an issue for EVs for a long time, is affordability. I think it's the number one question that people have when they buy a car, particularly a new car. And it has a greater effect than any other factor on whether they consider that vehicle. So affordability of EVs is progressing. That's great. How do we work on that problem. I mean, Zeta is dedicated, to the full supply chain. I think the most impactful thing the United States can do to increase affordability of EVs here is to continue to invest and support the midstream manufacturing capacity that we have. Certainly do no harm to it, but find ways to make that less costly to do here relative to the rest of the world. And
quickly, what is that? What is that midstream? What do you mean by that?
Midstream is battery manufacturing, but battery component manufacturing, and that means, how does a critical mineral become part of an anode and a cathode? How does that get wound up and put into a battery cell? Cell manufacturing is something that we're doing a lot of here. And then there's, pack and module manufacturing. Those are things that we are just scratching the surface of. Tesla's done a lot of it. Other OEMs are doing a lot of it now.
Yeah.
It will improve, but we need to support it. We need workforce development. We need, policies at the state level, at the federal level, that make it competitive with other places in the world. We don't want countries or companies that are looking at making a $5 billion investment in a factory to decide, there's too much uncertainty here. The costs are higher. Labor costs are higher. We try to do things the right way here, high social, environmental responsibility relative to a lot of other places in the world. So we want to make it as efficient as possible for them to locate here. I think that is critical, because that goes all, 40% in some cases of the value of the vehicle is in the battery pack.
Do you feel like the energy storage boom is kind of a secret godsend to that? Like, we do hear from people, it's like, well, I'm kind of down on EVs, but also I recognize that thanks to ChatGPT, we need energy that's like equivalent to, Chicago in August. And like, that's also kind of it's a need for battery storage for one, but it's also like a place where like General Motors and Ford are like, okay, this could also be a business model for us. Like, is that a boost here to what you're talking about, you think?
Absolutely. I mean, when you're talking about manufacturing battery material and batteries themselves, the more you make, the lower your cost per unit is. It's sort of basic economics there. Batteries are amazing, incredibly versatile, flexible technology. I think there's a general understanding that, the future as we imagine it will be much easier, more efficient. A lot of things are technologically possible. We know, engineering isn't going to be the constraint, but some of it is material availability. Some of it is requires additional innovation. I think, the data center boom could create a lot of demand here for that technology. It doesn't require it. There's a lot of ways to deliver electrons to a facility that needs, 500 megawatts or a gigawatt. But we're just now starting to understand the value of, stationary storage to grid stability, grid operability.
Yeah.
Sometimes these, because basically a large energy storage system is going to be performing a role similar to what a peaker plant plays. And there are a lot of other things it can do, but the system has been designed around, these plants firing up and sending energy into the system and the pricing that goes along with that. Batteries respond instantly.
Yeah.
And sometimes the system isn't even designed to capture the value delivered by the battery system. So, I think there's a lot of change that will come that will increase the value proposition of storage on the grid. It's not a Zeta issue, but to your point, it will benefit the cost of battery packs and modules, and get to that affordability question, I hope.
Yes. So that helps. What else makes you optimistic about the future of transportation, electrification, of EVs? There's obviously a lot of there's misconceptions, there is policy changes. The loss of the tax credit definitely is not going to help. I would argue even, affordability is getting better in some ways, but in other ways, tariffs and these other policies are not helping. But you also said that you think automakers consistently underestimate the demand for these things. So what makes you say that, and what makes you maybe hopeful for the future?
Yeah. Well, I mean, this is partly informed by my own personal experience of going through a period where it seemed, at least to me, that a lot of automakers with a, rollback of regulatory standards were, I don't want to use the word abandoned, but we're stepping back from the EV market. What that did,
taking a break, you might say, like in a relationship, just having some space with each other,
Yeah, I mean, I think they, a lot of the movement was actually motivated by public policy, by California policy, and sort of slowly, more stringent isn't even the right word, more, but with regard to, GHG emissions, stringent EPA rules.
Mm-hmm.
When that sort of faded away, I think a lot of automakers were like, okay, we know what the margins are on our ICE vehicles. It's a hard business. But what that did is create a wide open space for a company that was willing to aggressively scale up their manufacturing capacity and deliver as quickly and in as high volumes as they could. That being Tesla in 2020.
So you're talking about the first Trump era when some of the emissions rules were relaxed. Yeah.
Yeah. We had 2018 EPA rollbacks. We had, the California waiver, went away. And then there was a side deal with California from some of the automakers who I think were seeking regulatory certainty there. Because they expected it would come back into effect, and they wanted to say, okay, just tell us what to do. Tell us what the roadmap is so we can invest on these 3 and 6 year timelines for model years. I think it was a smart move. But it created a wide open space for Tesla to sell an EV to basically anybody who wanted one. And within a couple of years, Tesla was, the market cap was, I think, 1.3 trillion. It was, which, that's its own topic.
But another can of worms.
But it had, I mean,
a lot of that has to do with robots or something. Nobody really knows.
But like legitimately had 80% market share.
Right.
Of BEVs. That was
the only meaningful player in the market, really, by then. Yeah.
I mean, it was many years of 80-75% market share, and kind of proving the case that these were mass market vehicles. At between $35,000 and $50,000, and I have to say also, 2019 to 2024, the price of a new vehicle, independent of powertrain, went up 32%. It went from $37,000 to $48,000.
It's about $50,000 now. Which is insane.
To buy a new car became incredibly difficult. I think EVs. There's a small premium on average for EVs, but there are so many EVs, good EVs available, well below that, $10,000-$15,000 below the average transaction price of a new vehicle. But it matters. It matters how many of them are being made and sold. So I think that based on that experience, and now that we're at 10% or above 10% of new vehicle sales are BEVs. I mean, the number of people who don't own one, who are considering a new car, who know somebody well enough to ask them about it, that drives an EV and may have driven one for a while or may have just gotten one, is so much higher than it was 7 years ago, that I have faith in that process. Like, I have a lot of faith in the technology itself, in EVs just having their own appeal as just a car. And so I think that creates an enormous opportunity for all those, companies looking at the investment risk. The return The risk adjusted return, I think, is so high if you're willing to move fast.
Something you said at the outset is just how crazy fast this field develops. Like, I spent most of my career, about half of it, covering gas cars, and it's warp speed for electric vehicles compared to ICE engines. I mean, like that must be part of your thinking here. Is like people haven't seen how fast this where this is going to go yet, right?
Absolutely. I mean, we do see it around the world. We see really nice EVs for sale at $25,000 or $20,000 next door in Mexico. There are, 1 in 4 cars globally this year sold will be an EV.
Yeah.
And
wow.
There is an underappreciated fact about the United States, which does, I think, help explain a bit of why it is different here. The average vehicle miles traveled in the United States is basically double anywhere else.
Yeah.
There are a few Scandinavian countries that are, a little more than half of the average, what the average American drives. But in general, like if you look at the top 10, the whole bottom 5 is less than 50% of what the United States, the average US driver drives. I don't think, I don't know all the ways that impacts the way Americans as a whole think about EVs and range and charging infrastructure. But I do know that it matters in a different way than it does for a country where, the average VMT is like 6,000 miles a year.
Yeah, and it's like we by and large don't have public transit, and I'd say probably most of our cities, and it's like cars are how 90% of Americans travel daily, something like that. I'll have to fact check that later out, but it's high, and other countries don't operate like that. So we bear the brunt of the challenges of this technology when European city dwellers maybe don't as much.
That's right, and that led to a lot of really important but challenging questions when you're talking about something like NEVI, or you're talking about the proposed EPA rules.
Yeah,
if someone is like, I live in Montana, I live in Wyoming, there's not even a gas station within like 200 miles or something. How do I get across the state? How do I do this drive that I do once a month? So yeah, that is really challenging in a country like the United States, and in a way that it's not for a lot of smaller countries that may have public transportation, may have train systems, but even if you just travel by car, you're not talking about distances like that. West Texas.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So a lot of the policy discussions were oriented around those examples, and rightfully so. Because we need to have answers to that. But when we're talking now about what's the addressable market for EV companies, it's not necessarily those folks. Although electric pickup trucks are awesome and can do a lot of things that gas pickup trucks can't. But people that live in cities or live in suburbs and drive, less than the average 12, 13,000 miles a year, and have access to a lot of charging, have access to home charging or workplace charging. There are millions and millions, tens of millions of people for whom an EV would be a phenomenal choice if they're looking for a new car, for all the ways in which they use a car. So I think, that's a conversation about charging availability, the cost of installing charging in multi-unit dwellings, commercial parking garages, curbside charging, which is, I think, maybe the most important frontier.
Yeah,
in the United States.
Glad to hear you say that. I agree. Yeah, like not DC fast chargers everywhere, but like slower level 2 chargers kind of everywhere, because easier to install, less energy, and they're more useful in a lot of ways.
100%, and they're visible. They're highly visible, and there are a couple of companies that are, I think, doing some groundbreaking work there. It's Electric is one, Volt Post is another. Finding a way to do low cost curbside charging in the United States in a way where either the building is your customer or the city, the utility, whoever owns the lamp post, or the telephone pole. I mean, that is that's going to be a game changer.
Yeah. I say this all the time. This is like, I live in Oakland, California. Tons of people own EVs. I would love to, but there's no curbside charging and I don't have a parking spot. So like it's kind of game over. That'll be so huge when you can actually just charge when you're parked on the street.
I mean, if you were to talk to someone from Norway and say like, how do we get over this 10% hump? I'd be like, oh man, I don't know. I'd be like, well, do you have curbside charging? No. Do you have, ubiquitous workplace charging? No. Like, oh, well, I would start there because that's really important.
Yeah. I saw the curbside chargers all over London a few months ago. I was like, man, this is cool. Like the Brits really got this right. Like we never should have left, man. But it was really cool to see that.
Yeah. I will say it's easier said than done, having part of the, the curse of this job is, yes, we need that everywhere, but I know why it's not everywhere. And it's really hard. Sometimes it's small jurisdiction by small jurisdiction, one at a time. But that's what had to happen with DC fast charging. I mean, a lot of work I did was with jurisdictions for whom this was their first DC fast charger install. And they had a lot of questions. And that meant a much slower process. But by the 10th or the 100th one, it was like, okay, this, we do big electrical installs all the time. So it becomes easier.
Let's talk what you said at the outset too about those anti-EV forces. Like who is pushing that misinformation? Who are your opponents? Who are your enemies, Albert Gore, and how do you defeat them? Like what keeps you up at night, and like where is this coming from? These forces, you think?
I don't tend to think about things in that way. I think there are always opportunities to work with somebody. I mean, in policy making, you may be opposed to somebody most of the time, but they're not enemies. It is I think any time there is change, and from a business perspective, that means competition. That means encroachment on a market that has been reliable. And there may be sort of parallel things to try to slow down that transition or stop it, but also try to have a stake in it as well. I think, companies often, there are many success stories of companies that evolve and that diversify their business. So I don't think about things in terms of, enemies. But there are, I think, in all of these policies, there are lots of stakeholders that are advocating for a dramatic slowdown in the pace of EV adoption. And I do think that there are a lot of, sometimes good faith, sometimes bad faith arguments put forward with regard to China, with regard to the grid, with regard to charging infrastructure, and with regard to the vehicles. I think and it is frustrating because, we're just getting to the point where there are enough people out there that own an EV and would hear that and be like, that's not true.
Right.
It's a favored pastime in the United States to correct a lie when you hear it said in public. I think we love nothing more than that. Jump on the comment board. But
someone's wrong on the internet.
Yes, yeah. I'd say the best way to get the answer to a question is post the wrong answer, and everyone will rush to correct you. So that is sort of happening. I think even among people who are skeptical about EVs, I see that, people being like, well, that's nonsense. The thing that it's like they're all made in China, like demonstrably false, and most people know that now.
Mm-hmm.
But when it comes to rulemakings, when it comes to litigation around rules that were proposed or finalized last year, new rules that are being proposed, then yes, I mean, there are folks on the other side of the docket that are going to be making arguments. That's how policy gets made. I think there's a political, there's certainly a lot of funding that goes into, I think, amplifying doubts and misinformation about EVs. That is frustrating as a new industry, a relatively new industry. We don't have that 100 years of business, capacity built up, and packs and huge pots of money to put into advertising to try to beat that back. It's more organic. It's more, trying a lot of the role Zeta plays is trying to get in there and make sure that anybody who is in a position to make a decision has heard from us and gotten a very thorough and honest, representation of whatever the question is.
Yeah.
Backed by our companies that are well known and I think have their own, they bring their own history of, being honest advocates for things. And, we try to inform the process. I wish we had the resources that some of the incumbent industries do, that I think are on the opposite side of a lot of these dockets. But there's what's true and what's not. And I think we have to have faith, because we don't have a choice. We have to have faith that what's true will hold more weight. It will matter more, at least in the end, and at least over the medium and long run. But, it's hard to watch bad things happen and not be able to stop them. But we will try to change them. It just sometimes takes longer than we would like.
All right. Albert Gore from the Zero Emission Transportation Association. Thanks so much for joining us today. Really appreciate it.
Thanks so much for having me. I really enjoyed it.
Thanks so much, Albert. Appreciate your time. That was a great conversation. Thank you, Mr. Gore. All right, now it's time for Plus Minus, our segment where we talk about who's up and who's down in the EV world. Tim, who you got for me this week?
I've got a minus, and it's General Motors. They got kind of sunned this week by Ohio Senator Bernie Moreno. So if you remember last week, we talked about how GM and some other companies were planning to basically, through this kind of backdoor loophole situation, extend the EV tax credit past the September 30th deadline, right? If you lease a car and you're GM, you can buy that unit that's in stock, claim the credit, then pass that on to the customer later. So that was how they were going to extend it. Now that plan is no more, according to reporting from Reuters. So apparently Senator Moreno, who's also a former car dealer and generally tends to kind of get involved in automotive, policy, he raised a stink about it. He tattled on, quote, certain car companies to Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent in a memo, and then GM backed off from this plan. Bernie Moreno said that this was, quote, a total violation of congressional intent by these nefarious actors. So
nefarious actors.
Minus to GM, minus also to anybody who wanted to buy a Chevy Equinox or a Cadillac Lyriq over the next couple months. A lot less likely you're going to get like early sweet lease deal like you would have. At the same time, like I was reading about this and I was bummed, and I think Senator Moreno has a lot of bad faith language in his memo. He called it, the green news scam and things like that. However, Reuters also reported, according to people close to GM, that GM was trying to do this for 20,000 cars, which 20,000 cars times the tax credit of $7,500 is $150 million. And that is, I think it's within the letter of the law. If they were claiming these, they were buying them before September 30th, nothing should really stop them. But that's a lot of dough.
It's like it's General Motors. It's 150 million is like a rounding error to those guys. They'll be fine. That's it. Yeah. I actually do want to get Senator Bernie Moreno on this podcast. Believe it or not, I'm tired of having people on that we disagree with all the time. And if he's up for it, if anyone's listening who's connected with him, I'm Senator. I'm game if you are, and we will be gentlemen, and we will have an interesting, probably spirited discussion about
That's
this.
true. We should get him on. I think there's no chance he listens to this, which is probably a good thing given what I just said about him. So let's reach out. We'll get him on.
I'm game. I have a plus this week, and my plus is Lucid Motors. I'm driving the Gravity. I have to give it back Friday, and I'm a little sad to give it back because like the more I drive the Lucid Gravity, the more I like it. We had a story today from Kevin about the smart key issues the Gravity is having. It's like when you get into it, you have to shake the key a lot. You have to shake it to kind of get the computer to recognize the key so you can shift into gear. And then there's a little card thing that doesn't work at all. So I'm giving it a plus because I like everything else about this thing. I think it's really well executed, and I feel like that problem I just described is like 1 or 2 OTAs updates away from being fixed permanently. Like this is not the catastrophic launch of like the Volvo EX90 or something. Like this thing feels pretty dialed in. I think it kind of looks like a minivan a little bit. It feels like you're in a minivan when you're in it, but it's fast as all get out. It's nice. Like the tech is cool. Like I like being in the thing. Like I just kind of dig it. So, it's been neat to drive. You drove it at launch. You're getting it again, I think, right?
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to having it for more time. I didn't have it for long enough to notice any of those like key glitches or whatever. But I'm curious because you first got it. When you first got it, you slacked and you were like, it's fine. It kind of reminds me of an Air. It doesn't blow me away. But so what's changed? You warming up to it?
Sometimes it just, I've noticed like in testing cars, it's like there's the ones I think are great or shitty like right away. And then there's the ones that kind of take a little bit more time to understand what they're about. And like, I do think it's super expensive. Like the one I'm testing is like 130. So it's definitely not for everyone. I don't love the fact that like it's another super expensive EV spaceship. Like I'm getting the new Nissan Leaf to test on Friday. I'm actually quite a bit more excited about that because it costs $100,000 less. But like it is the Gravity is a cool car, and it shows how much like that company has improved its tech, even from the Air, which is probably like the best EV you could buy in America. So I think it's been cool to experiment with that and see where that company's going. And I hope they're successful with this model. I hope they fix the key things.
Do you think it drives freaking amazingly like I did? Just for a big SUV, the way that it handles and the way that it accelerates and everything is just wild.
I mean, it drives so fast, it literally almost made my wife puke when I was in it. Like I just rounded a bend and with full throttle, and it just keeps that those electric motors just uncork all the torque and keep going and going. And she was like, "Never do that again, please." And I was like, "Okay, this is awesome."
Yeah.
Yeah. And my press fleet guy's probably glad that I didn't return it to them in the that kind of condition with vomit everywhere and stuff. So she held it in. She's a trooper. All right, well, that's it for the Plugged In podcast this week. We'll be back next Friday. Today's show is produced by Michael Perkins and brought to you by the Motorsport Network.
Make sure to follow us wherever you get your podcasts, subscribe to the InsideEVs YouTube channel, and check out all our latest EV coverage on InsideEVs.com. See you next time.
See you next time.